I guess we have to talk about United Airlines, right? Right, Tom Benson? I mean, we have to, don't we? I mean, it's the story.
It certainly is, and I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon. I mean,
no.
I'm sure communication classes, marketing classes, customer relation classes, we'll be talking about this case in school environments for a long time. In
a way, though, it is kind of a break. It is kind of a nice break from all the political talk.
Sure.
Although there is someone that brought Trump into this somehow. Somehow Trump got involved in this story by someone. And I'll tell you in a sec. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee, the voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason. And a lot has happened since we last spoke, since I last spoke with you. We bombed Syria, so that's good. There's a whole debate on that. And then, of course, this United Airlines debacle. And, of course, North Korea is out there doing their stuff, and China is out there doing their stuff, and Russia's out there doing their stuff.
And Tillerson is over there, yeah.
Yeah, Tillerson's in Russia today. So, yeah. So I think people need a voice of reason. And by the way, that is Tom Benson, who is producing for me today. How are you, Tom?
I am doing fine. And another thing that you didn't mention is that in Russia, they've come out with a law that you cannot make fun of Putin by having him wear makeup or anything like that.
Yes, I saw that. There was some opposition to him, and they would put up this clown picture of Putin where he looked like a clown. And now it's against the law, so don't mess with Putin. So I actually do want to talk about this United Airlines PR debacle, because there's actually, at first I was like, I don't know, are people already getting sick of this? Is this thing just being totally sensationalized? But there actually are a lot of different angles to it. A lot of important angles that need to be discussed and involved with this.
Well, not only that, but the fact that a lot of people who fly have their own little story about how they felt they were mistreated by an airline, or connections weren't made, or they weren't allowed to, board at a certain time or what have you. Certainly not as serious as what happened, but everybody can relate.
Well, yeah. And I don't really fly that much. I've only flown like twice in my life. I know that it's crazy, but it's just not something my family ever did. And I did not realize that this was such a big problem with airlines, where they overbook flights all the time and they kick you off flights. I can't imagine any other industry doing that. Like, some other people brought this up, but my first thought was, could you imagine going to a Magic game and you're sitting in the seat and somebody in one of the staff comes in and says, oh, we have to forcibly remove you because a staff member wants to sit here?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you wouldn't put up with that.
No.
Nobody would put up with that. But for some reason in airlines, we kind of put up with that. It's just a very strange, but there's a whole bunch of legal angles to this. But of course, someone had to involve Trump. Yes, someone had to get Trump involved. John Cho, who plays in Star Trek. He's been in a bunch of other movies. He put out a tweet that is very interesting on this. He said, it's hard not to see a connection between the environment Trump has created and what happened on that United flight.
Oh, yeah, sure.
What?
In other words,
what?
We support the police, and none of the police brutality is accepted or happens more often. Is that his point?
I have no idea what his point is. It is the most absurd thing I've ever heard in my life. This story, it's actually one story that literally has nothing to do with Trump in any way, shape, or form. And somehow a leftist in Hollywood makes this about Trump. It's phenomenal. That's more of a reflection of politics in our society, but it has nothing to do with Trump. It has to do with airline policy and United Airlines' stupid PR move. Now, there's a lot of people who are actually on the side of United, believe it or not. Not a whole lot. Most people are against what they did, but there's a lot of people arguing that United had the legal right to do this. You might not like it, but they actually had the right to do it, and that guy should have complied when he was told to get off the plane. Now, it doesn't mean he can't complain later, doesn't mean he can't be upset, but he should have complied, and that the real issue here is that he didn't follow the law, he didn't follow the orders of police, and it created a whole bad situation. I'm actually been reading some stuff today that says that might not be true. A lot of people are saying, well, the airline had the legal right to do this. But that might not be true. Why? Well, airlines are federally regulated. There's the Airline Bill of Rights, or the Federal Transportation Airline Bill of Rights for passengers. There's a whole bunch of rules that they have to follow. So there's that angle. But let's before I get into the whole legal aspect, and if there's any legal experts out there listening and has a take on this, give us a call, 407-916-5400. You can also text to 23680. Let's say that United did have the legal right to do all this.
Okay.
Does that necessarily make it the right thing to do anyway?
Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Well, exactly right. There are a lot of things that you are legally allowed to do in your life that maybe you shouldn't do. And I think this might be another instance where, yes, they might have had the right to do this, but really should they have done this? And there's a lot of talk about it being, well, this happens a lot where they overbook planes, but this plane wasn't really even overbooked. It was putting their employees, their staff, over the paying customer.
It was overbooked once they got in the plane. They should have determined that ahead of time before they allowed passengers to board.
Well, and the reason why they didn't is because they wanted to get these passengers or they wanted to get these employees to the appropriate place to be able to do this. But it's just not a good situation. So let's go through the legal aspects of it, because at first everybody was telling me that United has the legal right to do this. So I did a little research, and there's a website affiliated with Mediaite called lawnews.com, and they usually have some really great stuff when it comes to issues like this. And according to John Bainzaf on that site, he is actually making the case that they did not have the legal right to do this. That under federal rules dealing with situations like this really did not apply, and they did not have the right to kick this person off the plane. Now, according to him, United Airlines is citing Federal Rule 14, which is a legally binding contract which, among other things, protects the legal rights of passengers and imposes legal duties upon carriers. And actually, United Airlines is citing Rule 21, which is refusal to transport, and Rule 25, which is denied boarding compensation. Now, United is going the route of Rule 25, which states that the airline does have the legal right to prevent you from boarding the plane if the flight was overbooked. Here's the problem with citing that rule. This was not before boarding the plane. That rule stipulates that it has to be done before you board the plane. This was done after he had already boarded the plane. That makes it murky here legally. It says United's Rule 25, as its title clearly implies, applies only to denied boarding. Thus, it uses the word denied boarding on the whole legal in its contracts. So they also have something that's called Rule 21 in terms of United's policy in this regard and legally. Rule 21 states refusal of transport. United Airlines shall have the right to refuse to transport or shall have the right to remove from the aircraft at any point any passenger for the following reasons. Well, and it lists a bunch of following reasons, some 24, which include unruly behavior, intoxication, inability to fit into one's seat, medical problems, concerns, etc. But nowhere in the list of some 24 reasons Is there anything about overbooking, the need to free up seats, the need for seats to accommodate crew members to be used on a different flight, etc.? He points out in the article, he said, this is very important because under accepted legal principles, a law or rule which lists in detail several different factors must be read not to include other factors which were deliberately not included or listed. So, for example, if a rule provides that a license to drive a car may be forfeited by violations of laws governing speeding, intoxication, yada, 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 it cannot be read to also permit license revocation for parking violations or for having a burned out license plate, illumination light, or anything like that. In this case, the failure to include overbooking or the need for additional seats and a long list of justifications for removing a passenger creates a lot of problems here. So what he's basically saying is under United Airlines contracts and under their rules, it does not apply to this situation. So there is a legal argument that maybe United did not have the right to forcibly remove this passenger like they said. Now, there are some saying that he did have the right, but it's also murky as well for the reasons cited. I found a really interesting piece here from CBS Denver, which from their local affiliate out there, which they actually interviewed airline attorney on this. And he makes the case that this is a little murky. While usually they do have the right to remove people, maybe this isn't the right way to go. This is attorney LaRusso, and I have the audio here from that piece. If you could play, it's titled United, Tom Benson. If you could play that audio for me, and we'll go through. I know there's a lot of like details I'm trying to get through real quick here, because I'm trying to be a voice of reason on this, because we talked about this on the morning show as well. We've seen it everywhere. And, I think it says attorney or something like that on the audio, Tom Benson. I think it's the first thing at the very top. Yeah. Little behind the scenes baseball for people out there. I'm trying to get through all of this stuff here because I'm trying to be a voice of reason, because, like in the morning show and all the debate I've seen, it's usually the same thing with everything. There's two sides to the debate. There's one side that's completely outraged. United doesn't have the right to do this. We hate United, yada, yada, yada. And then there's the other side that says, well, this guy should have followed instructions. This guy wasn't following the law. He broke the law. He should have been forcibly removed because he refused and should not have refused. And when I'm looking at this stuff legally, it's not as clear cut as all that, because the rules that were put in place do not apply specifically to this situation. And Attorney LaRusso out of Denver on CBS 4 actually makes this point. Here's the report.
Surely you can be involuntarily bumped. Can you be forcibly removed in a situation like this? That's where we get into a little bit of a gray area.
Aviation attorney Joe LaRusso says federal law allows airlines to involuntarily remove passengers from overbooked flights with compensation. Passengers do have a right to refuse, but if a person doesn't comply with airline instructions, federal law permits the airline to ask authorities to remove the passenger from the plane.
To the extent that this was taken, obviously, in this video with this amount of personnel around it, that creates an entirely different subject of whether it was overly forceful or maybe beyond the protocols.
LaRusso also questions if United was within its legal right to ask this man to leave the plane in the first place, saying standby crew should not have priority over paying customers.
Were we really dealing with selling more tickets than we had seats? It doesn't seem like that's the case, at which point the overbooking protocol seems to be unwarranted.
So he makes the point kind of similar to what I made before, that yes, airlines have the right to forcibly remove people. And yes, airlines have the right to prevent people from boarding for overbooking. But he mentions there that, one, this was not overbooking. Two, the way they forcibly removed him might have been excessive. And the rules I just stated showed that it doesn't apply here. that according to United Airlines' own rules, they cannot forcibly remove you for overbooking. That it's not a part of their stipulation, that they can prevent you from boarding, but they cannot forcibly remove you.
Everybody can be a Sunday morning quarterback now, but I wonder if they ever thought about making all the passengers in the plane get off before they did anything with this one gentleman, because then that would have turned the tide. They would have been against the guy, the other passengers, and in favor of the airline.
Well, yeah, this was handled so poorly. I don't care what side you're on. From a PR standpoint, you're a business, okay? And your business is to provide a service to your customer. And this is the business being arrogant and taking away a service to a paying customer. How is that smart business decision?
And in this day and age, you got to assume you're on camera 24/7.
I know.
And with social media out there, somebody somewhere is going to post it, and it is going to fly up in your face.
Yeah, it's the craziest situation. There are other ways that this could have been handled better, even if it is completely legal. There are some ways that this could have been handled a lot better. So United I think they're in some trouble, even if not legally, which it seems like maybe they are legally in trouble. They have some issues to work out. And of course, dealing with this, there's a lot of comedy involved, a lot of stuff going around that will make you laugh. And that made Yaffee laughy. And we'll get to that at the end of each hour as well. We have a lot more to get to in the show, a lot more things to talk about in the next hour. We're on until 9 p.m., by the way, if you're listening to the live show. In the next hour, I also want to get into the whole Syria things. I haven't had a chance to react on my show to Trump bombing the Assad air base and the whole debate over whether he had the legal authority to do that, whether he should have done that, what comes next, how do we deal with Russia, how do we deal with North Korea. So your voice of reason will go through it all. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I am your host, Michael Yaffee, and we will be right back.
You want to listen to Beyond Reason Radio live on your smartphone? Download the Beyond Reason Radio app now. Available in the Google Play or Apple App Stores. The voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason is back now.
So now the CEO of United is apologizing once again. At first, the original statement wasn't so much of an apology. It was basically an apology that they had to reaccommodate some passengers, is what they said. Reaccommodate them. Jimmy Kimmel on his show said, what he said, that's like comparing or saying we had to reaccommodate El Chapo from Mexico. Oh, man. But yeah, it looks like the CEO of United is apologizing now. It says, he says, I continue to be disturbed by what happened on this flight, and I deeply apologize to customer forcibly removed and to all customers aboard. That was CEO Oscar Munoz. And you're going to lose your job. The CEO is gone. There's no way this CEO keeps his job after all of this. Another thing that I found interesting, though, I'm reading this on Yahoo News at the moment. Apparently, Sean Spicer was asked about this in a press conference. He says, clearly, when you watch the video, it's troubling to see how that was handled. Why are we asking him about this? What does this have to... Why? Well, they're saying that there's call for boycotts. The U.S. Department of Transportation is promising a review of the airline's actions, and even the White House is weighing in. Now, Sean Spicer is in a little bit of a PR mess himself for some comments he said today, and we're going to get to that in a little bit. But I get nervous when I hear politicians now in Washington wanting to get really involved in this. I don't like this. I was reading this on PJ Media as well. Transportation Committee Democrats want a hearing on the United Airlines incident. I mean, I understand where they're coming from. They're in the Department of Transportation Committee, or they're in the Transportation Committee. But I get nervous because you know what's going to come of this. more laws, more federal regulation.
They want FaceTime. Come on.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's all they want. D.C. Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton, a member of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Subcommittee on Aviation, geez, say that 10 times fast, said she's going to formally ask Bill Schuster, chairman of the Transportation Committee, and Aviation Subcommittee Chairman Frank LoBiondo to convene a hearing to examine this and other incidents on flights. She says, I deplore the violent removal of a passenger from a United Airlines flight this weekend. Airline passengers must have protections against such abusive treatment. I'm asking our committee for a hearing which will allow us to question airport police, United Airlines personnel, and airport officials, among others, about whether appropriate procedures were in place in Chicago and are in place across the United States when passengers are asked to leave a flight. I just don't know if all this is really necessary. I mean, they're saying that this has become such a problem on flights that Congress has to get involved. But I feel like this is something that could just be handled in the courts. That if he has a problem, it could be handled with the lawsuits. The PR is already handling this. The free market's going to handle this because other airlines are not going to do that. Trust me, the airlines are not going to do this again. And if they're stupid. But is there anyone out there listening? And we're on Facebook Live, by the way. You can comment on Facebook Live. Just like Beyond Reason Radio on Facebook. Or you can follow me on Twitter at Beyond Reason R. But if you're listening to the live show, you can call 407-916-5400 or text to 23680. I would like to know what you guys think about this. Is this something that Congress should really be involved in? Because I'm not so sure that I necessarily think it's I think it's necessary. I think this is something that could be handled in the courts, especially if United Airlines broke the law or if this passenger broke the law. And of course, there's stories out there coming out about the doctor who was forcibly removed, and apparently he has some kind of criminal past. And I don't want to get too much involved in that because even if he does, it really doesn't matter. It really doesn't apply here. His criminal past doesn't apply in this situation. So this is another one of those situations where, like I said, if they had the legal right to do this, it was a dumb PR move and probably not necessarily the right thing to do. And how airlines have been doing this for so long is beyond reason to me. Now, I'm getting a text coming in about this and says United personnel asked for volunteers. They got 2 or 3 volunteers and needed 1 more seat. Due to overbooking, and United employees arrived for transportation to report for their duty. United, as per fine print on ticket, went to computer that specified the seat number that subject was in and place in line before boarding. I think it could have been handled differently. No doubt law enforcement was out of line. But he brings up the whole thing that this was a part of United's rules. But as I stated earlier, that's not necessarily true. According to their own rules, that does not apply in this situation. So this whole thing is just so beyond reason. I'm always amazed, though, how stories like this can just blow up and be everywhere and go viral. It's the age of social media. But this is being talked about everywhere by everyone with every different angle, and of course in comedy as well.
It's also in China.
Yeah, and even China. Now, that's another angle about this, which to me is just absurd. It's funny how these stories come up, and then there's like 10 different angles.
Yeah.
And like half of them, if not more than half of them, are just dumb and don't even need to be brought up in this situation. Now, China, a lot of the people on Chinese social media and others are saying, well, he was removed because he was Asian out of discrimination.
Yeah, of course.
I'm not on the airline side for doing this, but there is no evidence whatsoever that he was removed based on discrimination because he's Asian. Why It's just like earlier when I started the show, we talked about how someone brought Trump involved in this. And now people are bringing race involved in this. Why is it in every story we have to bring up, partisan politics and race, and then Congress feels like they have to get involved? Why is it that every story out there that becomes news, you get those different angles? A reason to blame the president and a reason to blame racism, when neither of those things apply here. They don't. So why they're trying to do that, I think, is just, beyond reason. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We're going to get into another PR debacle in terms of Sean Spicer today and something he said that was just kind of stupid. It's what happens when you don't think before you speak. And then we're going to get into something the Lake County Sheriff's Office did. They put out a video that's getting a whole bunch of controversy and causing some negative PR on their side. But I'm actually going to defend the sheriff in this regard because I think a lot of the negative press about it is really unwarranted. And so I will once again be your voice of reason and truth through it all. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
If you miss any of a show, you can download the Beyond Reason podcast on iTunes. This is Orlando's Smart Talk Radio. Beyond Reason Radio continues now.
This is the week of bad public relations moves by some, apparently. I guess. That seems to be the trend of this week. And some of it definitely is beyond reason, and some of it not so much. We talked about the whole United Airlines thing in the first half hour. I went over all the different legal angles, how some are telling me, it's against the law, that he didn't refuse to get up, he should have gotten up, while others are saying the airline had no right to do this. The legal area is a little murky. Listen to the first half hour. You can catch the whole show of any show, the podcast, anywhere podcasts are available. Best way to get it actually is just download the Beyond Reason Radio app and find the podcast of every show there as well. Well, another PR nightmare is actually coming from the press secretary of President Trump of the White House. He made some comments today, and I understand what he was trying to say. But anytime you have to say, I understand what he was trying to say, usually that means what he actually said was not very good. And this is what the press secretary, Sean Spicer, said in talking about Syria gassing their own people.
We didn't use chemical weapons in World War II. You had someone as despicable as Hitler who didn't even sink to using chemical weapons. So you have to, if you're Russia, ask yourself, is this a country that you and a regime that you want to align yourself with?
Okay. And then so people rightly pointed out that he didn't gas people in terms of military action, but of course he gassed his own people, his own Jewish people, in the gas chambers in the Holocaust. And so that's actually a real comparison for what Assad did, because Assad wasn't really taking military action against a military opponent. He just gassed innocent people. He just gassed his own people. So this is not a good statement by Sean Spicer.
Never, ever, and I know you should never say never, never, ever bring up Hitler.
I know. That should be a good rule of thumb. Just don't do it. So, and then he kind of made it worse because later he said, he said, I think when you come to sarin gas, Hitler was not using the gas on his own people the same way Assad is doing. He brought them into Holocaust centers. I understand that. In the way Assad, where he went into towns, dropped them down into the middle of towns. I mean, just semantics at this point, man. Just stop. Both are evil dictators who gassed their own people, okay? That's all really needs to be addressed. And then, of course, he said Holocaust centers, which is already not a good comment. So just stop. Just stop. Please. I understand that he didn't use gas in military campaigns, but he definitely gassed his own people. So this is definitely a foot in mouth situation. And Tom Benson, you were telling me in the break that he actually apologized.
Yeah, it just came across within the last half hour that he's apologized for his insensitive comments.
Yeah, probably best that you apologize for that. I mean,
well, at least he didn't go and
not
blame somebody else for it like United, you know?
That's a good point. I mean, Sean Spicer might be losing. I mean, the CEO of United is going to lose his job over this. Sean Spicer, he's very entertaining. You have to give him that in a lot of these press conferences. So there you go. Okay, another PR thing that is going on is Lake County, the sheriff's office out there, put out a video in which they talked about how they're really going to go after heroin drug dealers in the county. Okay. Now, if you actually see the video, he's standing there in front of a podium, and then he has people behind him, and they're wearing masks, and they're officers. Okay, they're wearing masks. Now, the reason why they're wearing masks is because they're undercover officers, and they don't want to give up their identity. That should be pretty obvious. But a lot of people didn't like this video. Some are saying it looks like an ISIS video. And, well, here is the audio from that video.
I'm Lake County Sheriff Peyton Grinnell. Over the last month or so, I've had several phone calls from citizens in this county concerned about the number of overdoses related to heroin. I want our citizens to know that I am aware of this serious issue. I am asking our residents to please call and let us know if you know of a location that this poison is being pushed out to our streets. You can remain anonymous. To the dealers that are pushing this poison, I have a message for you. We're coming for you. As a matter of fact, our undercover agents have already bought heroin from many of you. We are simply awaiting the arrest warrants to be finalized. So, to the dealers I say, enjoy looking over your shoulder, constantly wondering if today's the day. We come for you. Enjoy trying to sleep tonight, wondering if tonight's the night our SWAT team blows your front door off the hinges. We are coming for you. If our agents can show the nexus between you, the pusher of poison, and the person that overdoses and dies, we will charge you with murder. We are coming for you. Run.
Now, the only criticism I might have of this is it gives them a warning, that they're coming. I mean, maybe you wouldn't want to do that unless you just want them to get out of town. But most of the criticism is that it's too harsh, too tough. Looks like an ISIS video. And when I first saw this, I had no problem with this. And I still don't. I don't understand why we are against being tough on criminals now. And it seems like that's kind of a trend going on in our society right now, where we don't want to be tough on crime and criminals. I don't understand that trend. Now, I'm getting people, and I posted this on Facebook, got a lot of comments on this as well. I'm getting people telling me, well, the heroin epidemic should be addressed as a national health issue, not with police and guns and a crime issue. Okay, there could be an argument to be made that people who are addicted to heroin, you could treat them as a medical issue to try to get some of this problem solved. But the video in Lake County, they're not talking about the victims of overdose.
They're not talking about the users.
They're not talking about the users. Yeah, I call them victims. I'm falling into the trap. The users are not really victims either. That's another thing I don't like about this whole let's be soft on crime, because now we're saying users are victims. How are they victims? They chose to do it. It's pretty well known you shouldn't use heroin. They chose to use heroin. Now they're addicted, and yes, they need help. But I'm not going to just claim they're just innocent bystander victims. Unless they were forced to use heroin, they're not a victim. It's the same it's the same argument the left uses with abortion. They say the mother is a victim if she's not allowed to have an abortion because she'll have to take care of the child. And it's like, well, no, the mother chose to have sex. We all know sex creates babies. If you don't want to create babies, don't have sex. Unless you were raped, you're not a victim. It's the same thing here. Nobody forced them to use the drugs, so they're not victims. But despite all that aside, the video, I can only comment on what he is saying in the video because the video is what's getting criticism. I can only comment on what he's saying and what he says his actions are and his policy is. What he is saying is he's going after the dealers. And he actually has some sympathy for the victims, saying that I did it again, I called it victim, users. He actually has a little bit of sympathy for the users because he says if they connect the dealer to a user overdosing and dying, they will charge the dealer with murder. So actually, there's a little bit of sympathy for the user there as well. But the whole video is talking about going after the dealers. Are we against being tough on drug dealers now? I don't understand why is that a problem? Are drug dealers somehow victims now? No. They know they're breaking the law. They know they shouldn't be doing it, and they're doing it anyway. So I really don't buy the whole argument here that, well, this is bad policy. We should treat this whole drug epidemic totally different. Okay, maybe. Why not just, why can't two things be true at the same time? And this is in so many instances in our society, so many debates. We don't want to, we always just take sides and we have this one strong side and this one strong other side. And why can't two things be true at the same time? This is an instance where you can have that. You can have a plan that helps people get off a health-related plan that helps people who are addicted get off of that addiction. You can do that while at the same time be tough on the dealers and put them in jail for dealing an illegal, very deadly, poisonous drug. Why can't you do both? I don't understand why that's an issue. But I really think, and a lot of people won't like me for saying this, I think the people who go down that road just want drugs to be legalized. They just think all drugs should be legalized, that in a free society, that all drugs should be legalized. So anytime cops go after even dealers who are knowingly breaking the law and being tough on them, they don't like it because in their minds it shouldn't be a law in the first place. Now, that's a whole nother argument we could go down because there are laws that I disagree with. That doesn't mean I knowingly break them. You still have to follow the law, even if you disagree with them. All you have to do is look at the tax code. Okay? There's a lot of tax codes. I would love to get rid of the income tax, but I still follow the law and pay my income tax because you have to follow the law. It's the same thing here. These drug dealers, even if you disagree with the law, they are breaking the law, and actually they're causing a lot of damage to a lot of people, and cops being tough on them for knowingly breaking the law, I don't have a problem with that. And I don't get why all of a sudden being tough on crime is seen as bad. Don't break the law. It's pretty simple. You can do just fine in our society without dealing drugs. 407-916-5400. Text to 23680 if you're listening to the live show. We'll end this hour, because there's so much stuff out there, with things that made Yaffee laughy. And, of course, we have another hour to go after that. It's Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
Download the iHeartRadio app and catch the Beyond Reason Radio podcast. The conscience in your ear telling you the difference between right and wrong. Yaffee is back on the air.
Welcome back to the show. This is another edition of Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee, joined by Tom Benson producing. If you're listening to the live show, you can comment by calling 407-916-5400 or text to 23680. And I'm curious. I want you to stay with me the next hour because I'm curious how people will react, because there's a whole debate now over what Trump did in his Syrian airstrikes. Now a lot of Trump supporters don't like what he did and are upset at Trump. And then a lot of people who used to hate Trump love what Trump did. And I feel like no one is really, once again, being honest in that whole situation. So we'll go through that. And some people, it's one of those really divisive issues, once again, where some people will not like what's being said and some people will love what's being said. And, well, you know, it's the cross I bear as a radio host. But with this whole United Airlines controversy, one of the good things about it is that it has created so much comedy, and it has so many things about it that make Yaffee laughy. So much parody out there dealing with this whole situation is definitely what makes some of this really, really funny. So the best one that's out there, and it's actually gone viral, a lot of people have seen it already, but I want to play it again because it makes me laugh. And it's the Kimmel show, Jimmy Kimmel. He had a parody on this that he played last night, and the video is actually even funnier. But I have the audio here, and it's just fantastic. Here it is.
We're United Airlines. You do what we say, when we say, and there won't be a problem. Capiche? If we say you fly, you fly. If not, tough. Look at what you did here! Give us a problem, and we'll drag your ass off the plane. And if you resist, we'll beat you so badly, you'll be using your own face as a flotation device. United Airlines. You.
Oh, man. I have to admit that's pretty funny. Some of the tweets that are coming out about this are really interesting, too. There's so much good stuff on social media dealing with this. One person tweeted, bored as a doctor, leave as a patient. Another person said, first beating is free, $25 for each additional beating. Somebody tweeted out, this had a picture, and it said, we're looking for volunteers. And it shows a picture of like a bunch of federal agents boarding a plane with like rifles and stuff. It says we're looking for volunteers. It's good stuff. Another person said, United Airlines putting the hospital in hospitality. I know a bunch of comedians come out on social media. Another one said, your seat cushion can also be used as a defensive device. I got a good drummer in there. Okay, one person, there's so much stuff out there. I don't know if I can get to it all. One person said, jet lag isn't the only thing you'll need to recover from. And of course, now offering one free carry-off. Oh, good stuff. Stuff that made Yaffee laughy. All right, we have one more hour to go on this edition of Beyond Reason Radio. I have to get into this whole Syria debate on whether what Trump did was legal, constitutional or not, and what happens next. And should we go to war in Syria? So I'll give my take and we'll get your take as well. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
I look inside of myself.
So last week, I did a show where I talked about Syria and I talked about the whole situation and how it's not an easy situation. I did this, I believe, Thursday. And of course, right after the show...
Yeah, 30 minutes, I think.
30 minutes after the show, Trump did the airstrikes on the Syrian airbase. So I have not had a chance. I haven't had a show since then. So I have not had a chance to really comment on his decision to do that. And of course, he made my podcast outdated 30 minutes after the show, which just thinks you couldn't wait. You couldn't do it like 30 minutes before the show, Trump, you know. But fine, I guess he has more important things to worry about than the timing of him doing that on my show. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee, the voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason. And of course, I'm joined by Tom Benson producing as well. If you missed any of the first hour of the show, you can check it out when I post the podcast, or the video is up on Facebook on the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page. Like us on Facebook. We're on Facebook Live right now for this hour. The first hour, I talked about the United Airlines thing and the whole legal argument over that and the PR argument over that. So I addressed that, but we have to move on now to what's going on in politics and what's going on with Syria. Now, Tillerson went to Russia today, and he's trying to talk to Putin and trying to talk to Moscow and trying to get them to help us. You know, honestly, I don't know what the goal is now. This is kind of one of the problems here, which has started a lot of debate, is what's next? Now, Trump kind of says he's doing this for the element of surprise, I guess, so they don't know our next move, which is interesting. But there's a lot of people who don't really know what the next steps are. Does he want to remove Assad? Tillerson seems to suggest that, yes, we should at least find a way to remove Assad. Well, what does that look like? How do we do that without boots on the ground? Is this something the United States should be getting really involved in, is removing Assad from Syria? I'm not so sure. We have experience doing this, not the too distant past, and it didn't exactly go over very well. I talked about in the last show how we could very well accomplish this stuff in the Middle East, but it would take a lot of money, a lot of time, and a lot of troops. And the American people right now are not going to support an all-out war in Syria or another country in the Middle East unless we're directly attacked. It's just not going to happen. So now the argument is you have a lot of Trump supporters who are upset at Trump. They don't like this is against his America first policy. They don't really like what he did. And then you have the libertarian side saying, well, he should have went to Congress first. He should have had a declaration of war first or something in that regard. Should have got authorization of Congress, and it should have been debated in Congress. And that's not necessarily true either. If you look at the War Powers Act, there could be a legal justification for Trump doing what he did. So there's that whole angle. So I frankly, if you were going to respond to what Syria did. And what Syria did is they gassed their own people, but they also violated many UN resolutions and international law. So it's not like Trump is just reacting because, okay, he's upset what happened, so we have to bomb them. There's more things involved, especially when you have weapons of mass destruction. It can be argued that it's in the national security interest of the United States to take out his airbase so he doesn't do that again. Does that mean we should go to full-scale war? I don't think so. I don't think we should. And there's no talk that we are yet. So a lot of people are criticizing, saying we are now at war with Syria. Well, no, this isn't the first time a president's done something like this. Reagan did it against Libya, and Bill Clinton did it against Iraq in the 90s, where he bombed some of their facilities. Israel actually did it against Syria once. And, you know, Obama did a lot of drone campaigns without congressional approval and actually put special forces in Syria to fight ISIS without congressional approval. So there's a whole bunch of legal murky areas here. Now, the one leading the fight on this against what Trump did and saying that he really should have got authorization from Congress before he did it is Rand Paul, Senator Rand Paul. Now, when it comes to domestic issues, I usually support Rand Paul 100%. I think he's usually right. When it comes to foreign issues, I tend not to agree with him as much. I understand where he's coming from because too much intervention in places like the Middle East, ground troops and all that, has caused problems. So he's right in a lot of regards. But it just seems like every time the United States takes some kind of military action overseas, he's against it. I think the only time he was for it was after 9/11. And I think that's the biggest reason. As much as I love Rand Paul, I think that's the biggest reason why he'll probably never be elected president. because I think the American people just don't buy into that argument. You know, Rand Paul tweeted out after Trump did this, he tweeted out and said, you know, this was a bad atrocity, but we were not attacked, is what he said. I don't think you can make that argument necessarily. I don't know if I agree with the fact that we should always wait until we're attacked before we do military strikes. I don't know if that's the best foreign policy, but that seems to be his foreign policy. Now, here's Rand Paul. He was actually talking on Fox News with on the Judge Jeanine show and talking about what he thinks Trump should have done before the Syrian airstrikes. Here it is.
Well, you know, we just spent a lengthy week approving Justice Gorsuch. And what many conservatives like about him is that he adheres to the law. He's an originalist. I'm the same way as a legislator. I think we should look to our founding fathers and to the opening debates of our country. They said that the power to declare war or to initiate war resided in the legislature. Specifically, they did not give it to the executive. It was a big debate, and they were explicit. War would be declared by Congress. So when we go to war, that's the way it should be. The president should come to us and ask our permission. He's essentially asking the permission of the people to go to war.
Now, this creates a bunch of issues because there is the War Powers Act that does give the president some leeway on this. Now, if we did go to war with Syria, he would need approval from Congress to continue a war in Syria. He can't do it forever. But in terms of any time there's a military action by the United States, we need congressional approval. I'm not sure I buy that. The other problem with this is, let's say he did go to Congress first. I guarantee you Rand Paul would have voted against it. So he's making an intellectual argument here, but I don't really think Rand Paul cares about that as much as he does that we should just not be doing this in the first place, which is why he wants congressional approval on this. Now, Rand Paul continues on with his point. Go ahead and play cut 2 for me.
Atrocity is not an excuse to disobey the Constitution. So, for example, throughout Africa, as we speak, there are warlords that are stealing the food, and there are babies with swollen stomachs who are in the process of dying today because of war chiefs. But we don't decide to bomb every thief, thug, and murderer in Africa. So what we do is we should have a process, because we can't be involved everywhere. So let's have a process. We need to think about what comes after Assad. Is our goal to displace Assad or just send a bunch of bombs up and say, you better listen? I don't know if that works. But the other thing is, if we displace Assad, are the people on the other side any better? Or are they perhaps worse? Or are they perhaps equally as bad as Assad?
Okay. I actually agree with pretty much everything he said there. That we should not just go to war because we see an atrocity. And I made the point in the last show that, yes, there are genocides and other atrocities in Africa, and we don't do anything about it. So merely going to war, doing a military strike because of an atrocity, because we don't like what happened, he makes a good point there. That being said, this is a little different because he used weapons of mass destruction against international law, and he's in a place where that could easily be moved by terrorists, get in the hands of terrorists, and maybe strike American allies and against American interest. That's a totally different situation than a warlord in Africa hurting his own people. So I don't necessarily buy that argument here, but I do agree with him that we should not merely do military strikes for atrocities. So, yeah, there we go. And he made some other points that I just feel like he just doesn't want to, he talked about, removing Assad. Do we really want to remove Assad? Because that could have ISIS come in, or you could have the rebels come in who could be more radical than Assad, and it creates even more problems. We saw the same thing happen in Libya. We saw it happen in Egypt. So it can create a whole bunch of problems. I agree with him on that. Here's the issue, though. Trump hasn't decided to remove Assad yet. There's talks that maybe he should be removed, but this is not a full-scale war. There's no indication that we are now going to invade Syria and have a full-scale war with Syria now. So I think a lot of this criticism is a little premature. This was a specific strike against a specific airbase to respond to a specific act, which was Syria using weapons of mass destruction. Not only that, but it sent a message to North Korea and China and Russia. So that's why he did this. Now, Rand Paul actually makes another point here when he talks about removing Assad. Maybe there's another way about going to do that, to accomplish that goal. And this is another point I think it's a little naive. This is what he said.
But what I would say is there's another way to appear strong. Right now, the one thing that the neocons up here would hate and would drive them crazy would be to actually talk to Putin. And unfortunately, all this Russia mess has made it probably hard for him to talk to Putin. But guess what? An international deal with Putin that gets rid of Assad is part of the answer. And that's probably more likely to happen with Russia's cooperation than without.
Okay, that sounds all fine and good. For one, we are talking to Putin. Tillerson is in Russia today. Okay, so that is part of the plan, to talk to Russia. But Putin has not been cooperative on any of this stuff. He has no intention of getting rid of Assad. He has no intention of really helping us in the Middle East. And he's already upset at us for a bunch of other things, including Ukraine. If he's invading Ukraine, and he invaded Georgia before and wants to do stuff like that, do we really trust him and want to negotiate deals with him in terms of what best to do in Syria? And there's talk now that maybe Russia knew about this gas attack maybe coming, or they knew the gas was there, and they said they're in there to fight ISIS, but they're really not fighting ISIS. So I understand where he's coming from, but I think it's a little naive. I don't think Russia or Putin has any intention of helping us deal with Syria. They want control and they want influence in that part of the world, and they don't want us involved. And I think this comes a lot from Rand Paul's sort of anti-war take. When it comes to foreign policy, this is a trend with Rand Paul that I don't necessarily agree with.
The art of the deal may be at work here. Russia wants the sanctions lifted.
Oh, you think they might?
There might be a deal somewhere along the line. They're trying to, I think they may be trying to get the court of world opinion against Russia now by bringing up the fact that they may have known about the sarin attacks. And do you really want to be on that side of history as supporting Assad?
So you think, so Russia's going to use the sanctions on Ukraine and all that stuff?
I would, if I were
to help
Russia.
us in Syria.
Yeah.
Well, that's very interesting, but then that creates the whole problem of Ukraine and them just invading Ukraine and taking over that. I don't trust him. And I don't think we should trust them. Why should we trust them? What evidence do we have that we should trust Putin and Russia in these situations? There isn't any.
No, but there was no reason why we should have trusted Stalin back in the beginning of World War II, but he became an ally.
Well, there was a reason to trust him, actually, in that regard, and that was to stop Hitler.
Well, yes, of course.
And we both had the mutual interest of stopping Hitler, but what's the mutual interest here? We don't have mutual interest in stopping Assad.
To stop Assad and also to join the real fight against ISIS.
I'm just not sure Russia cares about either of those things like they did against Hitler. Now, Rubio had a comment on this right after Trump's airstrikes, and he made the case that Trump made the right decision. And I don't agree with everything Rubio is saying on this either, because Rubio seems to be very hawkish and wants complete regime change. And the American people are not they just don't want to go down that road right now. They just don't. So to try to force this on the American people into a war they really don't want to get into is not a good decision. That being said, Rubio made some interesting comments about the airstrikes. This is what he said.
It was the right decision for a number of reasons. Number one, Assad had signed an agreement not to have chemical weapons. It was an agreement that the Russians and the United States were signatories to and a part of. They also signed the convention not to have weapons, and then they had a UN Security Council and a resolution on them as well. They have violated that, and that therefore there needed to be a consequence for it. Someone needs to enforce it. Russia's not going to enforce it. They're helping them. And therefore, that was number one. Number two, I think it's important to remember there are hundreds of Americans stationed in that region, very near to that place, and this guy's using sarin gas. It could ultimately be used against our own troops, and that cannot be allowed to stand. So it is in our national security interest. Number three, I hear a lot of talk, and I'm not saying you, but others, about, oh, this is a symbol or a message. It certainly has a messaging component. But he struck a military base that was used not just for chemical attacks, but but potentially for future chemical attacks. And so it had a strategic objective that was very clear, and he dedicated the significant resources, 59 Tomahawk missiles, to destroying a particular airbase. That is how you conduct military attacks. You have an objective, and you dedicate the resources to achieve it, and the armed forces of the United States, as they always do, did so. So the president had the legal authority to act, the moral authority to act, and quite frankly, the military strategy to be successful at it. It was the right decision that he made.
Now, this is coming from Rubio, who's not best friends with the president. A lot of people against the president now have supported him on this. I think he makes a decent argument, though. He talks about, he laid it out, said they have national security interests involved here. So he had the Legal Authority Act. It was a smart military move that it was coordinated, directed, specific, but it doesn't go too far. But the problem with Rubio now is he believes we should have regime change and that the U.S. should be a forefront in doing that. I just don't think that's a good road to go down. You'd send Assad a message, don't use weapons of mass destruction. We'll make sure you don't use that and don't spread them. Now, he's making the case, Rubio, that if we don't remove Assad, we'll never be able to defeat ISIS because other groups will radicalize because they'll be against Assad. This is like a no-win situation. Like I talked about in the last show as well. It's like a no-win situation. The main point is the American people, which polls are showing the majority supported Trump's decision. They do not want to go to a full-scale war in the Middle East right now. So how do you remove Assad without doing that and without creating a lot more problems? I don't think you do. So I think this is one of those situations where I think Rubio's right on something and wrong on some others, and where Rand Paul's right on some things and wrong on some others. If you're listening to the live show, why don't you tell me what you think? You can call 407-916-5400 or text to 23680. There might be a solution legally in terms of giving the president the authority to do stuff like this. Someone is throwing out an idea that I think is very interesting, and we'll talk about that next. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
Listen to the latest episodes of Beyond Reason. Download the podcast at Spreaker.com. Place where we talk faith, culture, and politics. Beyond Reason Radio continues.
Before we get back to Yaffee, just want to pass along some breaking news that we've just found out about. John Giles, former lead singer and guitarist of the Jay Giles Band, has been found dead in his home in Massachusetts. He was 71. That's all we know at this time. Yeah. We'll have more coming up.
Everybody's heard this song. It's one of those songs that could just put you in a good mood.
Oh, absolutely.
No matter what you are, you listen, you're like, oh, I'm in a good mood now.
He also had out Centerfold, that was a good song too. Yeah. But they were mostly popular back in the late 70s and 80s.
Yeah, a little before my time, but I had not recognized the name when you told me in the break, but then I heard that song. Yeah, of course I've heard that song a million times. Good song. Like I said, one of those songs that puts you in a good mood. This is Beyond Reason Radio. Welcome back, everyone. We've been talking about Syria and the strikes against Assad's air base, and it's fascinating to me how the sides are splitting now, because now you have people like Patrick Buchanan, and I was just reading his latest article on his website, who's very upset at Trump. It's just amazing that none of these people were upset, when Trump failed to get Obamacare repealed and attacked the Freedom Caucus and wanted to start working with Democrats and all that stuff. None of these people cared then, or when he did some awful tactics in the campaign against really decent people. None of these people cared then, or when he lied about things. They didn't care about that. But now that he struck our enemy in an airstrike, now they're really upset. And this has really divided us. So, I don't know. I find that fascinating. But Patrick Buchanan said this goes against, in his article, he basically says this goes against the America First policy. Now, he also goes down the road that, do we really know that Assad actually did this? I mean, a lot of the intelligence suggests that he did. They actually have radar that shows the airplanes leaving right before the strikes, and they attacked a region where there are a lot of rebels. So it would kind of make sense, but he's going down that road because it fits his narrative. But he's really not happy with Trump because mostly he's saying, well, for one, he says, thus far, Bashar Assad seems unintimidated, brushing off the airstrikes. He has definitely gone back to bombing the rebels from the same airbase that the U.S. missiles hit. I find it very hard to believe that Assad just is brushing off airstrikes. Oh, no big deal. I find that a little hard to believe. Then Patrick Buchanan continues on. He says, but if he throbs to the war drums of John McCain and Lindsey Graham and Marco Rubio and orders Syria's air force destroyed, we could be at war not only with ISIS and Al-Qaeda, but with Syria, Russia, Iran, and Hezbollah. In a lot of ways, we already are at war with like Hezbollah and other things, but that's a whole different subject. I think some of this is just really premature because he's basically saying, well, Trump has brought us to war with Syria. Not necessarily. It's not necessarily true yet. He did this one airstrike. People need to calm down a little bit and before we get all crazy about fully going to war. But I agree with him, just like I agree with Rand Paul, that if he did want to do a full-scale war to remove Assad, the American people are not going to support it. So, in terms of the legal authority for the president to act like this, there's an idea being thrown out there by radio host and editor-in-chief of Conservative Review, Mark Levin, that I find kind of interesting. And I don't know how I feel about it. I don't know if I necessarily support it yet. But what he is saying is that we should be, this is what he said on his show this week. He said we should be making the case that we need to amend the Constitution to deal with modern circumstances, not because it's living and breathing, but because we have enemies that are acquiring nuclear missiles that will be able to hit our cities. He says, as much as I like a good debate, I also like our survival. Let me be the first to propose that we need to have an amendment to the Constitution that updates the declaration of war provision, not to eliminate it by any means, but to address the fact that we don't have enemies in red coats. We need to be able to respond more quickly to people who can blow us off the face of the earth in an hour's time or less. So what he's saying we don't necessarily need it, that the president does have the authority, but to end this debate over this, that we should amend the Constitution to give the president the authority in situations like this, which is really under the War Powers Act, but this would kind of cement that in the Constitution, to act quickly when we feel like our national security is at risk. And he makes a good point. In an age of intercontinental ballistic missiles, in an age of terrorism, in an age of nuclear weapons and weapons of mass destruction, it's hard to make the case that every time we have a military strike, it has to be debated for 3 weeks in Congress.
But doesn't the president already have that authority? They carry the football wherever he goes to retaliate against a nuclear strike.
Well, that's kind of the point I was making, is he really does. He does under the War Powers Act. He has that authority. What Levin is saying here is that authority should be cemented in the Constitution. So it would kind of reaffirm that authority in the Constitution. But you're exactly right. He carries a nuclear football, and presidents have used this in the past. So the real debate isn't, does the president have the authority to do strikes like this? The real debate is, one, should he have used it here? And two, was it in our national security interest? Was this enough of a security threat where we had to strike Syria in this way? I think there's an argument that it is, because they used chemical weapons, weapons of mass destruction. And I know there are people, and I wish this were true, that we just totally pull out of the world and we come somehow, build a dome over the United States or something, build up our defenses, and wait until we're attacked, and then we go and do military actions. But I just think that is impossible in our world. Like I said, Rand Paul said, well, we weren't attacked, so we shouldn't do this. But the whole point of doing stuff like this is so we're not attacked in the first place. Preventive actions. Because once we're attacked by a weapon of mass destruction, that can do so much damage. And not only that, but then you'll have people screaming, well, why didn't we do anything about this before? So this whole idea that we have to be attacked to do military action, I mean, you just look at history. And you go to the Tripoli War against the Barbary pirates under the Thomas Jefferson administration, early on in our country's history. Thomas Jefferson was no fan of big military, was no fan of going to war everywhere. But he sent Navy ships to Tripoli. Now, he wanted to negotiate a deal because the Barbary pirates there wanted us to pay tribute to be able to do trade in that region. We denied the tribute. We were going to try to negotiate, but the Barbary pirates cut down the flag in the U.S. Embassy in Tripoli, which was a declaration of war at the time. That being said, after that happened, we gave the Navy the authority to attack Barbary ships and, of course, defend our trade. We were not attacked in that situation. We were not attacked. The United States was not attacked in that situation. But because we wanted to protect our trade and because it was in our national interest, he gave the authority of the Navy to take on the Barbary pirates. I think if Thomas Jefferson, of all people, thought that way, I think it's kind of naive to say, well, in a world of global economy, intercontinental ballistic missiles, weapons of mass destruction, what we should do is totally pull out of the world and totally just beef up our defenses here and would be just fine and they won't want to attack us. I just think you can't live that way in this world. One, we have to protect our trade in a global economy. But two, you do preventive stuff like this so we don't get to the point where we could be attacked by a nuclear missile, because that could wipe out millions of people in an instant in our country. And when you have regimes like North Korea, who are unpredictable, who are trying to build this technology, all it takes is them to use it once, and they could do incredible damage. And yet we want to debate in Congress every time we have military action? I just don't know if we need to go down that road. I'm sure a lot of you probably disagree with me. 407-916-5400. You can text to 23680. We're on Facebook Live as well, just like the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page, or you can send me a friend request on Facebook. Search Michael Yaffee. Send me a friend request. A lot of interesting stuff. I want to get into something in the next segment that deals more with culture and faith. We talk faith, culture, and politics on this show. And I found an interesting piece by Lee Strobel, who wrote The Case for Christ and The Case for a Creator and a bunch of books like that. And he talks about the state of Christianity in our country and makes some very interesting points. And we'll address that coming up next. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
If you like Beyond Reason Radio, well, make sure to show it by liking the Facebook page at facebook.com/Beyond Reason Radio. Your safe space for conservative thought, not for political correctness. Yaffee is back right now.
Well, we have breaking news again tonight from the world of rock and roll. We've lost another artist. Guitarist Jay Giles has reportedly died.
Another song that just puts you in a good mood.
Oh, yeah. He died in his home in Massachusetts, where he'd lived for the last 35 years. He was age 71. He was the leader of the Jay Giles Band, the group that had 17 songs on the Billboard Hot 100 chart, including this one, Centerfold, which went to number 1.
Yeah, everybody's heard this song. Yes. Man, it seemed like we're losing a lot of legends lately in that regard. Wow. I'll definitely have to pray for his family. Well, we don't know exactly what happened yet, but I'm sure we'll find out soon enough.
Police are not commenting at this time.
Yeah, exactly right. Welcome back to Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We did talk about the United Airlines stuff in the first hour. So if you missed the first hour of the show, don't worry. I post the podcast of every show. You can go to iHeartRadio app and search Beyond Reason Radio, and it will be there right after the show tonight. So, or you can go to beyondreasonradio.com. Another place you can go, actually, is our flagship station, 1025WFLA.com. If you go there, click on the Good Morning Orlando tab and click on Beyond Reason blog. I post the podcast there, but I also wrote a new blog today, which I want you to go and read, and I might talk about it on the show tomorrow. By the way, I'm on tomorrow night as well at 8 p.m. And I talk about how the left should practice what they preach in terms of separation of church and state, and how they have not really been doing it in that regard. So really interesting stuff. I went over some of the history of the whole issue of separation of church and state. But speaking of that issue, I found a really interesting article by Lee Strobel. He commented here on Fox News. Now, if you don't know who he is the one who wrote the bestseller, The Case for Christ. He's also written books, The Case for a Creator, The Case for the Real Jesus, The Case for Faith, and I think he has a new one out called The Case for the Resurrection, and he has a movie out about the case for Christ. Now, he is a former journalist who tried to disprove Christianity. His wife became a Christian. He didn't like it, and he went out and tried to disprove Christianity and eventually became a believer himself. I've read several of his books. The audiobooks are really good, by the way. He usually narrates them, does a great job. They're really good. But this article actually addresses something else other than his main point in the books. It's titled, Why I Am Bullish on Christianity. Bullish. Yes, you read that correctly, he says. He says, when atheists claim there is no evidence for Christianity, I disagree. When liberal theologians assert that there are many paths to heaven, I object. When young people say God isn't relevant in the 21st century, I beg to differ. When analysts predict the decline of the evangelical church, I roll my eyes. He says, are my positions popular? Maybe not, but they flow out of convictions that have only grown stronger in the midst of evolving religious landscape in America. He continues on, he says, I've seen the surveys. I'm aware of the rise of the so-called nuns who profess no religious affiliation, and frankly, that doesn't trouble me very much. Troubles me a little bit, but we'll see why it doesn't trouble him. He says, and frankly, it doesn't trouble me very much. Rather than claiming to be Christians, as many have done in years past, now these people are now willing to be more honest. Today, it's socially acceptable, in many places even desirable, I agree with that, to be a skeptic. Atheist is no longer considered such a derogatory term. He says, the truth is that America was never as much of a Christian nation as some historians wish it were. Pretty controversial statement there by him. He says there was a veneer of faith over the land. Respectable people went to church. Now they don't pretend anymore. And he says that's okay. Now, I would say he's kind of right in terms of there was a Christian ethic, a Christian moral foundation in our country that we're losing, and that's bad. But a lot of those people, were they really Christians? Well, you would have to know their heart. And they probably weren't. And he makes the point that that can be actually a good thing because God doesn't like lukewarm Christians. He wants people who are real. Talks about that in the book of Revelation. So this is kind of a way of shaking the fence and separating the real from the fake. And this could bring about a real, genuine Christianity and Christian movement out there, which could be a good thing. It also can create a lot of division and a lot of problems in the moral foundation of our society. He later in the article, he says, more and more people growing wary of our materialistic and celebrity-saturated culture are instead finding exhilaration in Jesus. He says the proliferation of ministries that help the hurting, feed the hungry, and replace despair with hope, addicts rescued, broken families put back together, racial reconciliation, selfishness displacing self-interest, or selflessness, displacing self-interest. While some churches are closing, many of those with a relevant and biblically faithful message aren't just growing, they're burgeoning. So he actually has a message of hope for the future of Christianity. He says, in short, I'm bullish on Christianity. We're entering a golden era of Christian apologetics, where scholars are sharing compelling arguments and evidence for the faith. He said, at the same time, our shrinking world has exposed more people to the stark differences between the world's religions, and that is destroying the once popular notion that they all teach basically the same thing or have similar grounding in truth. He says, I see throngs of young people electrified by their faith. Give me 100 of them versus 10,000 with a cultural Christianity that doesn't revolutionize their character or values. He says, let me share a little secret. In our increasingly chaotic world, the Christian message of truth and grace continues to resonate among people who are tired of the shifting sands of postmodern relativism. He says, no doubt about it, count me among those who are optimistic about the future of church in America. Very interesting take. He actually gives hope. And what he is saying here is that by this shaking of the fence and getting rid of just cultural Christianity, we have an opportunity for a movement of Christianity that is based on genuine faith and genuine truth. And he actually gives hope. And he's actually saying we have a real opportunity to reach people in this world who are tired of the materialism, who are tired of the false gods of fame and drugs and money, and that this is an opportunity for a genuine Christian movement to make headway. I actually agree with a lot of what he's saying. Here's the thing, though. One, we're going to face more persecution in that world. We just are. It's already starting to happen. I talk about that in my blog. Go read it. Two, there are still a lot of faith leaders out there, church leaders out there, who are spreading a false gospel, who are not spreading the true word of God, who are using this spiritual vacuum, and that's what he's talking about, a spiritual vacuum, which gives Christianity the opportunity to fill it, but also gives a lot of false prophets an opportunity to fill it as well. Tom Benson, you have a smile on your face. Just, you can say it on the air. I'll say it. Joel Osteen. Joel Osteen. Anyone who is a big fan of him, I want you to go ahead and YouTube John MacArthur responds to Joel Osteen. It's great. But there's a lot of people like that, prosperity gospel. So we still have to be vigilant in terms of spreading the truth and the true word of the gospel. But I like his optimism here. But it also brings concern because we have a chance of real persecution in the future. Unfortunately, that's true. But we have God on our side. So we have the creator of the universe on our side. So we'll be all right in the end. All right, we will end the show on a much lighter note. Another thing that made Yaffee laughy. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
Subscribe to the Beyond Reason podcast today on your Stitcher app and hear the voice of reason anytime. Your voice of truth in a world of fake news. Beyond Reason Radio continues right now.
So we have talked about a lot of stuff on the show today. If you missed any of the show, you can catch the podcasts of the show anywhere podcasts are available, and make sure to share the podcast with your friends. You can also follow me on Twitter at Beyond Reason R, or send me a friend request on Facebook, or like the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page. I will be back on tomorrow night for the live show at 8 p.m. We'll do it 8 to 10 p.m. tomorrow. But we have to end the show once again, of course, with things that made Yaffee laughy. Yes, and one of the good things that has come out of this whole United Airlines PR debacle and everything with dealing with that is some great comedy, some great parody out of it. So one of the things that was going viral out there was, it says on it, there's a video out there of this, and it says on it, above it, it says, United Airlines training video. And this is actually from the famous movie Airplane, I believe. And it's really great. This is the audio from that.
I've got to get out of here. Calm down. Get a hold of yourself.
Stewardess, please let me handle this.
I've got to get out.
Calm down. Now get back to your seat. I'll take care of this. Calm down. Calm down. Get a hold of yourself.
Doctor, you're wanted on the phone. Everything's going to be all right. Please.
Sister, please, I'll handle this.
I've got to get out of here. Out of here. Got to get out of here.
This is great. I saw that. It was going viral. It's great. And the video is actually a lot better, too, because on the video, it shows a line of people that are, because she's just a regular person on the plane, and she's freaking out, and they keep punching her in the face, get all over herself, and it has a nun puncher, and then in the video, you see someone with, a baseball bat, and you see someone with boxing gloves. There's a whole line of people that are getting ready to punch her.
Shirley, you jest. Yes, but don't call me Shirley.
Oh, man, I miss him. Yeah. I miss it. He was so... Those movies, his movies... And I'm having a brain fart. What was his name again?
Peter Graves? Is that who you mean?
No. The other guy. The guy who's in all the airplane movies and Naked Gun movies.
Peter Graves is the one I know.
Oh, maybe that is who I'm thinking of. I feel like that's not. Dang it! I'm trying to. We're really out of time. But yeah, all his movies are really funny. I'm totally Googling this right now. But yeah, check out the video if you have to see that. It has to be Leslie Nielsen. That's it. Leslie Nielsen.
Okay, there you go.
There we go. I miss him. All this stuff was funny. I need to go watch Airplane right now. That'll put me in a good mood. All right. I thank you all for joining me. So check out the show, the podcast show, if you missed any of the show. Or you can listen to me tomorrow night. I will be on WFLA Live 8 to 10 p.m. And we'll have, I'm sure, a bunch of stuff to talk about. Probably too much to talk about. And, we'll talk about it then. Check you guys out then.
Well,